Australia looks normal. It sounds normal. The signs are in English, the cars drive on. Okay, maybe not that part. But for the most part, it feels like a place you'd recognize, until an American shows up. And within about 48 hours, they're standing in a supermarket aisle, phone out, filming themselves like they just found evidence of a government cover-up, because nothing, and I mean nothing, is what they expected. Today we're breaking down the moments Australians don't even notice anymore, the stuff that's just Tuesday here, but completely short-circuits the American brain the second they land. And stick around, because number 7 is the one that actually makes Americans a little bit angry once they realize what they've been missing their whole lives. Let's get into it. It always starts here. The supermarket. An American walks in expecting chaos, cereal aisles the length of a football field, 40 types of peanut butter, self-checkout machines yelling at them. Instead, they find something smaller, quieter, almost, reasonable. And the first thing that stops them dead? The eggs. Sitting there. On a normal shelf. Not refrigerated. To an Australian, that's just how eggs exist. To an American, that's borderline illegal. Because in the US, eggs are washed, which strips a protective coating, meaning they have to be refrigerated or they'll spoil. So when an American sees unrefrigerated eggs, their brain doesn't process different farming standard. Their brain processes danger. Some of them genuinely hesitate before buying a carton, like it's a trick question. But that's just the appetizer. Because next they check the prices, and this is where things get a little emotional. A block of cheese that would cost $3 back home is suddenly $9. A tub of Tim Tams they've never heard of costs more than their entire lunch used to, and they start doing that thing. The math in their head, converting dollars to dollars, insisting there must be a mistake. There's no mistake. Welcome to the exchange rate. Welcome to Australia. And just when they think they've adjusted, they hit the checkout. No bags. Nobody's bagging their groceries for them. And suddenly they're standing there, frozen, holding 4 items and 0 plan. That's moment 1. But it's nothing compared to what happens when they get outside. Here's where it gets interesting. Because Americans expect Australia to feel like America, just with accents and kangaroos. Instead, they step outside and something feels off. It takes them a minute to figure out what. Then it clicks. Where is everyone? Coming from cities built around cars, malls, and constant noise, a lot of Americans land in an Aussie suburb, and it feels almost eerily calm. No strip malls stacked every quarter mile. No giant illuminated signs fighting for attention on every corner. Some genuinely ask out loud, is there an event happening? Did everyone leave? No, this is just a Tuesday afternoon. And then they notice something even stranger. People are walking, not to their car. Actually walking, to the shops, to the train, to a cafe down the street. In parts of the US, that alone can raise eyebrows, because so much of American life was built assuming you'd drive everywhere. But the biggest gut punch usually comes next, when they check their phone for directions and realize the nearest major city might be hours away, not minutes, hours. That's when the size of this country actually starts to sink in, and that changes everything about how they see the rest of the trip. Because next, they're about to meet actual Australians. And that's a whole different kind of culture shock. This one confuses Americans in a way they don't expect. They've heard Australians are friendly. What they didn't expect is how that friendliness shows up. Because it doesn't look like the customer service friendliness they're used to back home. An American walks into a cafe expecting a big performative, "Hi, welcome in, how are you today?" energy. Instead, they get a relaxed, "Hey, how's it going?" from someone who genuinely could not care less about upselling them a muffin. At first, some Americans read that as rude, cold even. Then something happens that flips the whole narrative. A stranger helps them. Not because it's their job, not for a tip, just because that's what you do. Maybe it's someone giving directions and walking half a block out of their way to make sure they find it. Maybe it's a bartender who slides them a genuinely useful tip about where not to go that night. Small moments, but it starts rewiring how they see the whole country. Because they slowly realize this isn't performative friendliness. It's just normal decency with 0 script behind it. And that hits different when you're from a culture where friendliness is often tied to a transaction. But hold that thought, because their next stop involves money. And this is where things get uncomfortable fast. If there's one moment that breaks an American's brain completely, it's this one. They finish a meal, the bill comes, and there it is, the moment of panic. Where's the tip line? There isn't one. Some Americans genuinely don't know what to do with their hands at this point. Years, decades, of being trained that a server's actual income depends on their tip has created a reflex. So they tip anyway, sometimes 20%, sometimes more. And Australian staff? They're not always sure how to react. Because here, wages aren't built around tips the same way. Staff are paid a proper wage regardless. So a tip isn't expected. But it's also not refused because free money is still free money. This single moment says more about the difference between the two countries than almost anything else. It's not really about the money. It's about why the money exists in the first place. One system built on guaranteed wages, the other built on hoping someone's generous that night. And once Americans understand that, a lot of other things about the trip start making sense too. Which brings us to something that genuinely stuns them next. Because it's not a cultural quirk. It's the kind of thing that makes them ask, out loud, wait. How is that even possible? This is the moment, the one that gets the reaction. Somewhere during the trip, maybe someone gets sick, maybe it just comes up in conversation, an American learns that if something goes wrong medically here, it's not going to bankrupt them. They ask questions, a lot of them. Because back home, an ambulance ride alone can cost more than a used car. A hospital visit can end in a bill that follows someone around for years. And here there's a public system, Medicare, that covers a huge portion of that, funded differently, built differently, expected differently. This is usually the point in the trip where the tone shifts. The jokes stop. Because this isn't a that's quirky moment anymore. It's a wait, why don't we have that moment. Some Americans get visibly frustrated. Not at Australia. At the realization of what they've been living with and just accepting as normal their entire lives. And once that door opens, it doesn't close. Because now they start looking at everything else a little differently too, including something as simple as a public toilet. By now, the big shocks have hit. But it's the small stuff that actually sticks with people the longest. Public restrooms that are clean, free, and don't require buying something first. Some Americans genuinely stop and comment on this because in a lot of US cities, a public bathroom is either locked, a fight to find, or requires a purchase to access the customer-only code. Then there's the walk signals, some intersections that chirp or beep in a specific rhythmic pattern for accessibility, which throws first-timers completely off the first few times they hear it. Or the way daylight can stretch on forever in summer, especially further south, throwing off body clocks in a way that catches people completely by surprise. None of these things are dramatic on their own, but stacked together, they create this constant quiet undercurrent of, this is not what I expected, that runs through the entire trip. And that's exactly the moment where the real question shows up. The one almost every American ends up asking by the end of their trip. By the end of it, the eggs, the empty streets, the tipping, the healthcare, there's usually one question that comes out of almost every American who spends real time here. Why doesn't home feel like this? Not because Australia is perfect. It's not. It has its own problems, its own frustrations, its own version of normal that locals complain about just as much as anyone complains about home. But there's something about experiencing an entirely different default setting for how a country runs, different systems, different expectations, different definitions of normal, that makes people re-examine what they thought was just how things have to be. And that, right there, is the real story behind every one of these reactions. It's never really about the eggs, or the tipping, or the empty streets. It's about realizing normal was never a universal thing to begin with. So here's the thing. If this is the first World Decoded video you've watched, you basically just walked in halfway through a conversation that's been building for a while. Every video on this channel breaks down another one of these gaps. The stuff that feels invisible if you grew up with it, and completely wild if you didn't. And every single one uncovers something you probably didn't know you didn't know. If you subscribe now, you're not just subscribing to a channel. You're catching up on everything you've already missed, and getting in early on everything that's coming next. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment below. Which one of these actually shocked you the most?